All right, three stories, three moments that nobody in Washington saw coming. And when you see what connects all of them, you'll understand why this week might be the most chaotic, the most revealing, and the most dangerous stretch of the entire administration. Because what happened on the moon program isn't just about space. What happened with Pam Bondi isn't just about one person leaving a job. And what's happening in Iran isn't just about a military situation on the other side of the world. These three stories are telling you something about how power actually works in 2025. And most people are only looking at one piece of the puzzle. So let's look at all three. Let's go. Start with the moon, because what's happening to the American lunar program right now is genuinely unbelievable, and almost nobody is covering it correctly. For years, NASA's Artemis program was the crown jewel of American space ambition. The plan was clear: return humans to the moon, build a sustained presence, beat China to establishing a permanent foothold on the lunar surface. Billions of dollars invested, international partnerships locked in, astronauts trained and ready. The program had survived budget fights, political transitions, and technical setbacks. It was supposed to be untouchable. It isn't anymore. What's happening now inside the space program is what insiders are quietly calling moon madness. And they don't mean that as a compliment. Because the decisions being made, the timelines being shifted, the contracts being restructured, the partnerships being quietly abandoned, none of it follows a coherent strategic logic. It follows a different kind of logic entirely. The logic of budget pressure meeting political priority meeting a White House that has decided certain things matter more than maintaining America's lead in the new space race. The problem is that China noticed. Chinese state media has been running stories for months about the instability in the American lunar program. They're not wrong to run them, because what's happening isn't a temporary budget adjustment, it's a structural retreat from a program that took decades to build. Here's the detail that should alarm you. The international partners who signed on to Artemis, the space agencies of Japan, Canada, the European Union, Australia, they all built their own programs around the assumption that America would lead and that the timeline was real. When the timeline slips, when contracts get restructured, when the logic of the program becomes harder to follow from one month to the next, those partners start making other calculations. And some of them are starting to wonder out loud whether China's program might be a more reliable partner for the future than an American program operating under moon madness. That's the real cost, not just the wasted billions, the geopolitical cost of partners who no longer trust your timeline. That's a damage that doesn't show up in a budget document, but it shows up everywhere else. The people inside NASA, who have spent careers building toward this moment, are watching it happen in real time. They're not talking publicly, they can't. But the frustration is visible in every delayed announcement, every quietly modified press release, every timeline that gets revised without explanation. America is not losing the space race in a single dramatic moment. It's losing it in 1,000 small retreats that individually seem manageable and collectively represent a strategic collapse. And while Washington argues about the budget line items China is launching, that's the moon madness story, and it's bigger than anyone in the mainstream is saying. Now let's talk about Pam Bondi, because her departure from the Attorney General role is being covered as a routine personnel change. It is not a routine personnel change. Nothing about the circumstances surrounding her exit is routine. And if you pay close attention to the timing, to the cases that were pending, to the investigations that were gaining momentum, to the specific moments when the decision to leave crystallized, the story looks completely different from the official narrative. Pam Bondi came in with a specific mandate. Her confirmation process made clear what the administration wanted from the Department of Justice: loyalty, alignment, an AG who would use the institutional power of the department to advance priorities that previous AGs had refused to advance. She was supposed to be the person who finally made DOJ work for the administration, rather than against it. Here's where it got complicated. Because DOJ is not just a political instrument. It's an institution with thousands of career prosecutors, investigators, and officials who have spent their lives building cases based on evidence, not politics. And when the institutional pressure coming from the top conflicts with the evidentiary reality that the career staff is working with, something breaks. Either the career staff breaks, which produces a different set of problems, or the political leadership breaks, which is what you're watching right now. Bondi's exit isn't just a personnel change. It's a signal about the limits of what's politically possible when institutional reality pushes back. There were cases in motion. There were investigations that developed their own momentum independent of what any political appointee wanted. There were prosecutors who built records that couldn't simply be buried by a phone call from the seventh floor. The specific cases that were causing the most tension are not being named publicly, but the people inside DOJ know exactly what they are. And the fact that Bondi is leaving, that the official story about her departure is being carefully managed, that the timing coincides with very specific developments in very specific investigative threads, none of that is coincidental. Institutional departures at this level are never coincidental. So long, Pam Bondi. But the story she was in the middle of doesn't leave with her. The files stay open. The prosecutors stay at their desks. The evidence doesn't get reassigned when the AG does. Whatever comes next at DOJ, whatever the next person in that chair tries to do with the institutional machinery, they're inheriting a set of active situations that were already complicated before she arrived and are more complicated now than when she started. That's the real farewell story. And it matters more than the talking points about her tenure. And then there's Iran. This is the story that is the most consequential and the most misunderstood. Because the framing around the Iran situation has been entirely wrong from the beginning. People have been asking the wrong question. The question everyone is asking is whether there will be a military confrontation, whether the current tensions will escalate into something larger, whether the diplomatic track can hold, or whether it collapses. Those are important questions. But they're not the central question. The central question is why the administration is handling Iran the way it is. And the answer to that question is sitting in the history books that apparently nobody in Washington is reading right now. Because here's Trump's Iran reveal. And it's more uncomfortable than anyone wants to admit. The reveal is this. Every major American military engagement in the modern era, from Korea to Vietnam to Iraq to Afghanistan, lasted longer than anyone predicted when it started. Every single one. The pattern is not ambiguous. It is not a matter of interpretation. It is a documented historical fact that American military involvements, once initiated, develop their own momentum, their own institutional logic, their own political constraints that make exit far more difficult than entry. The architects of every one of those engagements believed they were managing a controllable situation. They were not. The situation managed them. The people around Trump who are shaping the Iran policy know this history. Some of them lived it. Some of them gave speeches about it. Some of them wrote books arguing that the lesson of every failed American military engagement was that you should never start what you can't finish cleanly. And now they are in rooms where the options being presented include things that history says never finish cleanly. That tension between what the historical record says and what the political pressure is demanding is what's driving the peculiar quality of the Iran situation right now. It looks indecisive because it is genuinely torn, not between good options and bad options, between bad options and worse options, with the historical knowledge that both categories tend to expand once the shooting starts. Here's the specific detail that changes the analysis entirely. The Iranian nuclear situation has a timeline that doesn't care about American political cycles. The centrifuges spin on their own schedule. The enrichment levels increase on their own schedule. The window in which a particular type of action is feasible or effective narrows on a timeline that is determined by physics and engineering, not by polling numbers or congressional calendars. Every week of diplomatic process is also a week of enrichment process. And the people who understand the technical dimensions of this are telling the people who understand the political dimensions that the gap between those two timelines is closing faster than the diplomatic track is moving. That's the reveal. The reveal is that other wars lasted longer than the timelines that are now being discussed. The reveal is that the historical pattern of American military engagement suggests that whatever comes next will also last longer than predicted. The reveal is that everyone in the room knows this, and nobody can say it out loud because saying it out loud changes the politics in ways that none of them can manage. So you have three stories. A space program in retreat from a strategic competition that the country cannot afford to lose. An attorney general departure that signals something significant about the limits of political control over institutional momentum. And an Iran situation where the historical pattern of how American military engagements actually unfold is colliding with the political pressure to take actions whose long-term consequences the historical record makes very clear. Here's what connects them. In each case, the official narrative is designed to make something complex look simple. The Moon program situation is framed as a budget adjustment. Bondi's departure is framed as a routine transition. The Iran situation is framed as a negotiation with a clear outcome waiting at the end of it. None of those framings are wrong exactly, but none of them are telling you what's actually happening either. What's actually happening in all three cases is that the distance between what the administration wants to be true and what the institutional and historical record says is true is growing. And when that distance grows in three separate policy areas simultaneously, that's not bad luck. That's a pattern. The moon madness isn't accidental. The Bondi departure isn't routine. The Iran reveal isn't reassuring. They're three data points in a larger story about an administration operating at the edge of what institutional reality will support. And the edge, as anyone who's studied any of the historical cases we've been discussing knows very well, is exactly where things stop being manageable and start being something else entirely. Watch the next 30 days. Because the things that are in motion right now, the investigations that stay open after Bondi, the partnerships that are reconsidering their commitments after the Moon program decisions, the technical timelines in Iran that don't pause for political convenience, all of it is converging on a window that is much shorter than the official calendar suggests. And when those threads converge, the story that breaks won't look anything like the official version of any of these three individual situations. It will look like something that was building for a long time and finally arrived all at once. That's what this week actually is. Not three separate stories, one story with three pieces, and you just saw all three.